I felt like I was in crisis mode with my product career, and I was like, are there Black people in this field? Like, are there Black women?
When I saw Rosa presenting in women products, when I said like, oh, finally another Latina in product.
One morning, came into the office on Monday, and they basically said, stop what you're doing, because I was originally working on the Bill Point product, which was eBay's payment solution. They said, stop what you're doing. We just bought PayPal. Now you got to go figure out how to be friends with your former enemy and make nice and figure out the integration. And so Deb was one of the PayPal leads on the product side, and I was the eBay lead on the on the eBay side. So that sort of early time working together ended up resulting in a lifelong friendship. And then we reconnected as we were looking to start up Women in Product. Welcome, everybody. Super excited to be facilitating today's panel on creating your community, starting or seeking an affinity group. And I am joined by amazing leaders from Latinas in product and Black women in product. So Yvette, Ngozi, Rosa, and Paz. And we're going to be sharing our stories with you on what led us to create our communities and sort of our learned and shared experiences and any recommendations if you're thinking about starting your own. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Ha Nguyen. I'm on the Women in Product board, and I guess I consider myself one of the early founders of Women in Product. So for those of you who may not have heard the early story, it was a bunch of female product leaders getting together over dinner one day, talking about how there wasn't enough representation of women in the product field, and thinking that we should probably form a community together. And the early idea that we had was, let's do a conference. And so we got Facebook to open up their space for us. And we weren't even sure how many people would be interested in joining us for the conference. So we set up like an interest forum, 5,000 people applied for 1,500 spots. And then we knew we had something there. And then after the conference, we put all 5,000 women in the Facebook community, which has now grown to almost 40,000 women. So it's been amazing to see sort of how Women in Product has evolved. But I'm also the co-founder of the Product Leaders Summit, and it's a VP product community, which I started with my friend Gib and Gib Biddle. Many of you might know Gib, and my friend Dan Olson. Many of you might know Dan. And that's a VP product community because we got together and also said, hey, why doesn't this community exist? And we should form this community. And it's an annual conference where we get VP product leaders together. And so I've been in product for 16 years. I moved over into venture capital. Most recently, I was the COO of a marketplace startup called Swimply. Right now, I'm on sabbatical, so it's been fun for me to have the time to be able to meet amazing women like Yvette and Ngozi, Paz, and Rosa. So super excited to be here. So Rosa, I'll kick it over to you if you can quickly intro yourself.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Rosa Welton here. I am Director of Product at Intuit, and just a couple of months in, so enjoying the onboarding experience. And I was in that original audience that Ha mentions for the first Women in Product conference, and I just loved it. And back then I said, someday I want to be part of that stage. And it took years and my own community to ask and say, why not you? Why not now? And so really happy to be part of this today.
Thanks, Rosa. Why don't we go to Paz?
Hi, everyone. I'm Paz Zuniga. I'm also the co-founder of Latinas in Product with Rosa. I am senior product manager at an educational technology company called Vista Higher Learning. And I think I also joined in the same way. I was part of the audience that Ha mentioned, and then Rosa of the Women in Product. So yeah, I think we found several things in common, and that's why we started the community with her.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Yvette.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yvette Lapompe. I am Director of Product at Premion. I'm also the Head of Partnerships for Black Women in Product. And I've been in the ad tech space and in ad tech products for 12 years now. I've been an active member of Women in Products. I've been to, I think, 3 of the conferences. 2 of them were in person, which was pretty cool. And I've been really involved in the Women in Product New York community. So I think there's tons of overlap in terms of Women in Product group and Black Women in Product. And that's what led to my involvement today.
Amazing. Great to have you here. And Ngozi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ngozi Ofoche. I'm the founder of Black Women in Product, and also a trust product strategist at Meta. So it's cool to come full circle where Women in Product started here. Before Meta, I was a product manager at a couple companies, and then moved into this role where we work with product teams to incorporate trust domains such as privacy, accessibility, and inclusion. I'm excited to talk more about how we grew the Black Women in Product community.
All right, well, let's start there. Why don't we start with you, Ngozi, which is, you started the Black Women Product community. Like, why did you start it? Like, what need did you identify, or pain point, or gap? And how did you get started?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, like right now I'm in a role that's the product field it's fairly new and it's always ever growing. And so I knew I would be wanting to be in a role where I'm at this intersection of law, technology, and society. And so I was transitioning into different roles in tech, including consulting, and saw product management as an avenue into that area. And so as I had this business and law background, and I had the corporate experience to understand what product managers do, but the path to get into it was very nebulous. And then the interviewing processes, they can be very stringent, as many of you know. A lot of practice goes into them, and if you don't have the community to provide you that the insight, or if you don't really know people who are in the field, it's really hard to understand what they expect in interviews. And so I was coming from professions which had large communities for Black professionals. And so I reached out to my friend Yvette, who I went to college with, who I knew was a product manager. I'm like, where are these communities for Black people or Black women in this field? And we really couldn't speak to any at the time. So it was during the early days of the pandemic where I said, okay, let me just start a Slack community and share some links out to people that I know and see who joins. I really thought I would get about 20 people who join that link or join the Slack community. But I think also because I sent out the link around June 2020, so around the George Floyd protest. Also shared it in the Women in Product Facebook group. I think there was a message asking for how can we support the Black community in this space. I posted that message. Yvette replied to it. She put a comment about her perspective about supporting Black people in the Women in Product community. And we just skyrocketed from there. So it was a combination of kind of like building it and they will come. But also one thing that I like to emphasize in community building is how are you aligning with other people? How are you finding support there? Because I do highlight the support that we've continuously gotten from the start for Women in Product in that. And so, yeah, we're since then, we're about 700 people across the world.
Amazing. In just 2 years.
Yes. And so it's really just like, what is your mission? Who do you want to connect with? And just build it and people will come.
And I think that's incredible too, because as you said in the beginning, you were like, is there anybody else who's like me in tech? And then now you found your tribe of 700 women. So amazing. Yvette, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember when Ngozi reached out to me and thinking back in my tech career and being in product for, at the time, was 10 years. I was normally the only woman in the room, much less the only Black woman in the room. So to be able to foster that community was just great. as Ngozi mentioned, just the hurdle of getting into product, especially when you don't have a tech background, it was especially challenging for Black women at the time. But not only that, but also just being able to advance in your career. So you got into the product role. What's next? How do you move up the ladder? How do you get to a director position, for example? And just uncovering that need within our community, but building the support to help women achieve that and get to the next level.
Yeah, I love that both of you mentioned sort of your support network, right? So we're here to lift each other up. So I love that. Paz, how did Latinas in product get started?
Right. Well, it was one in a conference, women in product, that I saw Rosa, whom I met actually a few years ago, and I was also considering a more higher level of position, like a director level, and that was the first Latina director level I saw, and I saw her in the conference. So I reached out and I said, I know you might not remember me, but I'm also in product, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you, knowing more how we can maybe have something. And she said, like, well, funny thing, I've a lot of other Latinas have reached out and have this same kind of questions and asks. So that's how we started. In my case, it's more personal because I'm an immigrant and all my networks have really disappeared when I moved here 15 years ago. So I really felt the need that I wanted to have support to learn from other women, their experience, and in general, like to find this supportive community that I was really longing, because I had no community at some point. So that's how basically it started.
And was it a Slack group as well, or what's the?
We started with a monthly meeting. There was also a group in LinkedIn that we had. So that's how we connected and gathered more people. But in general, there were around 5 of us the first time, Rose, I think, right? And it started as in general, just a monthly meeting, and then it grew in other channels.
Got it. And you're about 80 people now, I think you said, something like that?
Just over 60. Yes.
Just 60. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
And
you'll probably be 80 right after this.
I know.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah. And then Rosa, so when Paz reached out to you, I mean, what did?
Yeah, well, I credit to Women in Product. I had just spoken at the conference in 2021, and I saw these notes from women who said, hey, I've never seen another Latina in product. And I just heard that over and over again. And with Paz's energy, we said, well, let's create this. Let's bring people together. And frankly, even just to see each other's familiar faces makes a big difference after a day of being kind of the only in the room for a lot of us. And so I want to say, you mentioned where we started a LinkedIn group. We kept it simple. We didn't try to be perfect. We used Google Calendar. We use Zoom. And then we have a little WhatsApp group that we used as well. So use the tools we have and see what works, and just really focus on, can we bring the people together into the same room on a regular basis?
Awesome. I love that. Okay. So, I know we started to share a little bit, but I wanted to really understand, like, what has the community that you started meant to you, and what has it done for you? And maybe you can also even share stories, not even personal stories, but stories that you've heard from other members of the group of what community has meant to them. So, I'm guessing new friendships, but has it opened doors? Has it led to promotions? So anything you can share. And so I don't know who wants to start, but
I can keep going and comment on that. It is personal, but also I was benefited from hiring someone from the group onto my last team, and so someone I never would have connected otherwise was able to share about the opportunity and bring someone into the group. So that was I certainly benefited. But what I also is really heartwarming, one of the members got a new job offer, and she was going to take the offer. And what she said about negotiation was, in Spanish, lo que me den está bien. Whatever they give me is fine. And so the group was able to rally and say, whoa, hold on. Here's some tactics. Let's practice. Here's some things to think about and share experiences. And not only in terms of here's how women who are product managers can negotiate, but women maybe with our upbringing who were asked to be quiet and to not ask for more, not rock the boat. And so we were able to really, I think, bring that intersection together in conversation about money and negotiation.
Okay, I love that. Women should always ask for what they deserve. And I'm glad that there's a support network that helped your friend realize that she was worth way more than what she was originally offered. So love that. Yvette and Ngozi, do you have any stories you want to share about how the community opened up doors or anything else?
Yeah, like I've made so many friends from also growing this community. They always say when you get into your 30s, it's so much harder to make friends. But what I've loved about Black women in product is being, grow my friendship with Yvette, of course, but also like make a ton of new friends from around the world. And then also from members of the community, I've heard similar success stories of people being able, maybe not having success in their job search, especially for product roles, connecting with people for mentorship or for reviews or interview prep, and eventually landing that first product role. And we all know, like within product, it's all about like just landing that first step. But for a lot of people, due to whatever experiences they had, it has a large impact on their confidence, just in their professional career and their life in general. So it's always heartwarming to hear that. And then last, because we have such a global community, the Black diaspora is so large. So hearing about people connecting with one another within Nigeria or in West Africa. So like Black women in product there, or Black women in product in the UK, or like Paris, or even South America. It's just so wonderful to hear. And so we hope to encourage that people are able to make their own smaller communities, just as we were able to like grow a community within women in product. So it's, but yeah, it's you just don't know what further connections you can make.
That's amazing. Bringing a global community to feel like they belong and feel like they're right next to her and lifelong friends. That's awesome. Paz or Yvette, anything else that you want to, any other stories you want to share? Otherwise, I'm gonna move on and ask about some programming. But
well, I think what I can add is in general, like what Rosa mentioned, and also Ngozi, is like the support behind it, right? Rosa gave this example of salary, and in our previous monthly meeting, we actually supported a few members who were, for example, also were laid off from several companies. We tried to help them figure out what we could do for them and help them and be supportive in that area. So that those situations, I think community is really important, because you need to rethink a lot of things. So for our members, I think for any member in our community to find that kind of support, whether it's professional or even emotional at some point, it's really important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And there's been a lot of folks that have been impacted by the economic downturn and layoffs. And so it's really important to not feel like you're alone in this, and find your community that's there to support you, and, be that sort of emotional support network, and maybe open up doors too. But I think just having somebody to help you sort of process your emotions, super important. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. Sorry, I do want to also add to that. Like, I think that's also been one of the big things about Black women in product, that validation, like being able to tell your story and your experiences to somebody who shares a similar background. And I've seen how much it's changed so many people, like just being able to, whether it be like the shared layoff experience, or whether it be like, the difficulty you might have in interviewing. I've talked to so many members, and they just feel so much relief just having someone to talk to. So it's also something important to think about.
That's great. So I wanted to shift a little bit into programming. So there are folks in the audience who might be looking to start up their own sort of a community or affinity group, and they're looking to figure out like how to get started. So any like tips or tricks there in terms of like where do you even start? How do you even find the community? And like what types of programming would you suggest that like really would like start like the flame, you know, and build a fire here. So,
yeah, I can chime in there.
Sure.
So our community grew pretty quickly. I think what helped us the most was being able to dissect like where in their career folks are. Like, are you entry level? Are you trying to get into product? Are you more senior or senior product manager, or are you like head of product director level and above? I think that helped us in terms of like creating programming that's specific to where folks are in their career and make it more relevant. So we can do like someone who's trying to get into product will do something like resume tips or like interview tips, but someone who's more established, we're telling them, you know, tips on like how to advance in their career and what the different areas of product are outside of like, you know, a senior product manager, what's next. So that has been really helpful in our community and just being able to pivot in terms of programming that's relevant depending on where you are.
And is this education mostly just over Slack and DMs, or do you actually hold like?
So when we have folks join our community, we ask like where they are, like what their title is, where they are in their career, and we use that information to then target when we do programming. So if we're doing like a panel where we have people who are giving interview tips, for example, or if we're doing some specific programming to more senior level managers. Our program is just different. Most of it is Zoom currently because everything's online.
So
but even when you get more in person,
you're doing events and workshops. Okay.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Rosa and Paz, what are you doing in Latina women in Latina women in product?
Right. So, well, I think, I can suggest to the audience is to be, in general, product managers, we are very scrappy. And I also worked in some nonprofit, so I got to learn how to really get some things done with very little or for free. And we started very simple. As Rosa said, keep it simple, trying not to be perfect, just we used, for example, LinkedIn. So in that way, we would know what you also did, Yvette, with the levels, with the different levels of needs that members might have. We also sent over some surveys and getting some suggestions for different topics that they were interested in. From there, trying to figure out what kind of topic we could build around, and ask our own members to present or to provide that kind of knowledge. So in general, I think it's to keep it simple, but trying to listen to what the members of the community want as well.
Are any of you doing like in real life, like dinners or like meetups?
We had one meetup. We went for local members. We went to a wine tasting together.
Ooh.
And that was really sweet just to see each other in a different setting.
Yeah, I feel like it's time now. I think we all want to sort of get back in person and make in real life connections. So definitely encourage that. Does anybody think about doing a conference, like your own sort of Affinity conference? Too early.
Yes. Too early. I think we can work with Black women in product as well. That would be great.
Yeah.
Well, that's
yeah. Actually, and you read my mind. I think my next connection or my next question was around collaborating with other communities and forming allies. So, Yvette, I know you had a couple of examples or stories you wanted to share.
Yeah, definitely. So even in collaborating with women in products overall, and just how can women in product be a resource to Black women in products? And one of the areas that we specifically called out was in terms of sponsorship. I think that's definitely an area where for Black women in product, it's one thing to get into the product space, but it's just like, how do you have that mentor, that sponsor to help you throughout everything? And just partnering with women in product, that's been super helpful in that arena. There's also other companies. We definitely, that's a great idea in terms of thinking of a future conference and partnering with you guys, Latinas in product. So there are definitely ample opportunities. There's so many groups, and we always see everyone as an ally. So how we can share resources and just help each other has been super helpful in our community.
I love that.
Yeah, and actually for us, it's been helpful because as we were growing, we didn't have a lot of programming or other resources. So I would encourage members to go check out Techeria or Women in Product or Latinas in Tech, because they have great programming that more people should be aware of.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to throw out a question that wasn't sort of in the pre list of questions, but anything that hasn't worked, like any experiments that you ran that just didn't work, or I don't want to call them failures, but just sort of mistakes, lessons learned. Ngozi.
Yeah, I think this is more just the lessons learned, especially like starting this community in the pandemic, with so many things going on between 2020 and 2021. There was we wanted it to be like a very integrated community where everyone's pitching in. So what I've learned in doing that, my management style is usually like, I'll empower you to do things the way you need to get done. But I realized with such a large community and with people volunteering their own time, that you need to give a lot more strategic direction, have like a more solid project plan if you're delegating responsibilities to different people in your community. So that is something I've learned in different ways in the past like year and a half or 2.5 years. But I would emphasize to anybody building a community like this to still rely on the other people in your community to pitch in. But I think there are maybe non-monetary incentives that you can give to people. Maybe, if you're getting support from the community in this way, maybe you commit to this many hours supporting somebody else. But yeah.
Yeah, I actually want to get a sense as to how much of the time commitment each of you put in, because, as I mentioned, I formed Product Leader Summit with a couple of friends of mine, and we always call it a labor of love. And, and we actually do an annual conference, and there's like hours and hours, like probably collectively like 300 hours that we put into making it a great conference. And so it really is a labor of love. And we're even in the process 5 years in of figuring out like how we scale it beyond just our involvement and our commitment. So I like the just, pulling other folks in to like get them to also lead and support the group, not just like getting value, but also contributing as well. Yvette and Rosa, Paz, I wanted to get a feel for like, how much work is it, especially for folks in the audience who are thinking about forming their own community? Like, what is involved, and any tips that you can provide so that it's not such a burden. Forming is one thing, but continuing the engagement is
something entirely different. I'll combine that with your question on what didn't work.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely spiky. We have a monthly meeting on Zoom. And so Paz and I meet up, and, as much as we want to plan ahead, it's figuring out, okay, what's the programming? Who's volunteered to speak on a topic? Are they lined up? Just the normal kind of event lineup stuff. But it's also, I've found, managing and encouraging new members, like the onboarding experience, right? For any product, it matters. And so originally we'd have events we'd promote through the LinkedIn group, and we'd see these new members show up and then we'd never see them. And so I added a step where I will set up 15-30 minutes with new members and just try to welcome them and help understand what their motivations are. And so it's not scalable forever, but it was a way to build up that initial community, because at least they knew me and they would start to show up. And that really was a pivot point for us. And so I think it's like, as we grow, then we'll have to figure out, well, now how do we make people feel welcome when they're new?
Yeah. But that is the labor of love. You spend 15 minutes with every new member introducing them. That's amazing. Paz or...
Yes, I can add as well. I think it has to do also with what Ngozi mentioned, is all this strategy and what Rosa is like, how scalable, how we're going to scale this at some point, and to find some support from other members as well. Or they can own, for example, our case was like, can you own this topic over November, December, and we know that we would need to manage just a few things in there, but at some point, and it's already something that we are discussing, it's like how we are going to manage this in the more long term and scale it. So yeah, from the strategy point is to find more members who would want to help us, and take it from there.
Yeah, I'll definitely chime in on that. I think, especially when coming to planning events, when you have specific members who can commit some sort of time, even if it's just for one event, not necessarily has to be an ongoing commitment. That's been really helpful for us. We have folks who volunteer for either an event or a topic that is of interest to them. That way we can span out the bandwidth of the labor across the community.
Yeah, I really love the tip of not just recruiting new members into the group, but like how do you recruit existing members to like engage and to lead, and I know certainly that's even a challenge for women in product too, of just like, okay, it's like we can't just rely on the same sort of small group of folks. So like how do we sort of expand and get like broad folks to not just participate but to also sort of step up into leadership roles. So it's really good. I'm going to just go around and just like any last words of advice or anything that like we didn't talk about that you wanted to share. And then for the folks that are in the audience, feel free to, in the Q&A tab, I think, pop in your questions. I'm going to start pulling questions from the audience here momentarily. So start thinking about your questions for the panel. But yeah, like Yvette is first on my screen. So Yvette, anything that we didn't cover that you did want to sort of share with our audience, if they're thinking about either joining a community or forming their own?
Yeah, definitely. I think there was even a question that I read briefly around, like how do you find the need for a community if it's not based on ethnicity or gender? And I think wherever there's a gap and you feel like there's a need. So if you're in, I can use in my example in the ad tech space, and you're like, I don't see any product managers in the ad tech space, then maybe that's a community that you can form. So I think it's always just like figuring out where there's a niche, figuring out where you feel like there could be more support. And if you feel like there's a need for a community there, then go for it. It can be as simple as starting a Slack community and see who joins. That's what we did. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's always room for more groups.
Awesome. And Ngozi, any last words of advice? Or
yeah, to expand on that, like it's always good to have a mission or something that is a shared value in your community, but also be open to that changing. Like we never know everything. So just as we do in product management, like the reasons for why you have that community could change, and you can change it with the other members of your community. But start with that mission, which is like, a definition of the problem or whatever you're missing and what you're trying to provide. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Rosa, you're nodding.
Yes. I'd say, we hear the phrase, dig the well before you need the water. In some ways, like the community started small and it will feed you and you feed it very organically. And just as a side note, I'm thinking of pulling together a community of women who like throwing dinner parties, because hostesses have a different way of looking at the world and I want to learn from them. So.
Okay, I want the invite because I love cooking, and before the pandemic used to throw dinner parties. So
see, yeah,
I'm in.
Let's learn.
Right.
I would like to invite more people like Latinx or anyone who wants to join us as well to the community. And Latinx community is very underrepresented in tech, so it's important for us to show and be able to show what we are capable of and how much we can add to the products in general overall as a community. and you never know. I mean, when I joined with Rosa, I was really reluctant of adding any, for example, a conference topic, and Rosa pushed me and said, like, you should just present this proposal for women in product. You can do it, and try to find this person who always pushes you more. You can be in this community, in another community that you want to create, but it's really important to find it so you can leave the comfort zone, and learn, basically. So I would invite anyone who wants to join us, in LinkedIn or the community, and also the Black women in product. Maybe we can end up doing something as well.
And maybe I'm going to take audience questions here, but maybe you each can drop in the link to how to join your communities or how to get in touch with you. That would be great, because I'm sure a lot of folks who are here in the audience aren't yet part of your communities, but are very much interested. So if you could just drop that into the chat. And now I'm going to go into the Q&A tab here, and I'll ask Hannah's question. So Hannah asks, how do you best gather insights from the women in your communities and understand what types of communications, events, and workshops are most impactful for them? And then what strategies did you use to get your community engaged when you were starting off and there was little involvement? So just to summarize the question again, I think it's just, like, how do you know what your community is actually looking for? So with your surveys or any solicitation that you got from them. And then the cold start problem, which is always the hardest, which is in the beginning, it's crickets. So how do you build engagement? So who wants to take that? Rosa,
I'll echo what Paz said about surveys. Again, and this is where the other advice is find someone who complements your skills and expertise. Paz is great at organizing these events, planning our agendas, and doing the research. So she did a survey. She talked to people about what mattered. It was part of the topics when we met, like what else do people want to hear about? And then that informed our agenda. And so the other part that is a subtext for me is, can I have this small group meeting be a training ground for someone to try out a topic that then maybe they take to a conference? So I also see it as kind of a professional development opportunity.
It's great. Ngozi or Yvette, do you want to?
I really like that idea about allowing people to test out their ideas for future conferences. But we, in the beginning, when we first started, we held a big town hall. And so we got a great feedback from the initial members about what they were seeking from that community. And so that helped us start to program. And when corporate sponsors started to reach out to us, we had a starting point for how they partner with us. And in terms of, and then, we continuously try to get feedback, just seeing the questions that are asked in the community as it's grown. So we know that a lot of our members are either very early in their career or early into product. So based on the questions they're asking in the community. So we base our programming around that. And then in terms of engaging, it was crickets when I first opened the Slack community. But luckily, there are a lot of tools with Slack to help you encourage new members to answer certain questions that help them introduce themselves. And then as that grew, then you have other members who are, saying hi to people and using cool emojis to engage with people. But I really do like the idea that you had, Rosa, about reaching out to new members specifically. And I know that we have a lot of members now, but I do think there's something that we could try to replicate there on how to have that personal touch with them.
And I'll just share sort of something that we're doing. I'm on sabbatical, and I started a women's sabbatical group. And I think the first session over Zoom had about 50 or 60 women in it. And we did breakouts. So we did small group breakouts so that different folks could actually get a chance to interact and get to know each other. And then one prompt that we threw out at the very end was, before the next month's meeting, to find one woman to go and grab a virtual coffee with, and so before the next session, you should actually have 2 virtual coffees because you're reaching out to somebody and then hopefully somebody's reaching out to you. And so we'll see if people in next week's session actually follow the prompt. But I think any ways that you can encourage folks in your community to make those like one-on-one or small group connections, I think it really helps to build like the connection and the affinity. Okay, other questions. I'm just going to go right down the list. Okay, so Tanvi, hi Tanvi, asked a question of like, so obviously this group started, these 2 groups started based on sort of ethnicity or nationality, but what about forming like other groups that are not related to ethnicity? So Tanvi said she's thinking about starting a group of remote PMs together, or group PMs. So it could be based on career level, it could be based on sort of, like the remote environment, which can be very lonely, and how to best succeed in a remote environment. So don't know if there was a specific question around that, but like I guess it's sort of like, how do you know, like if you're thinking about starting a group, like if it will resonate? And
yeah, I'd say pulling some threads together is if there's a charter that you can write that 1 or 2 other people can sign on to and feel excited about, that's your nucleus. And from there, it's finding other people who maybe can benefit from that group. The sabbatical group. Someday, I want to be in that sabbatical group.
I highly recommend it. It's so much fun.
So much fun. And then the other piece, Tanvi also asked about the fizzle out. And that's, I've had other groups that have fizzled out because we didn't have clarity on why we were meeting. I tried to do it all myself. That didn't work. So you learn from it and then go on to try again another time.
Okay, I'm going to add to that, which is definitely find like 1 or 2 other colleagues who share that passion that you're trying to ignite, because it can be lonely. And I do think like starting a community on your own and doing all the work, it's hard to keep that level of sort of engagement and motivation. So find a couple of other folks to start it with, so that you can hold each other accountable, and just it'll be much, much more fun for you. And then I would say, don't be afraid to start small. So like, I don't think that Ngozi and Yvette had a goal to have like 800 women. I think that if you had just found 5 or 6 women in the beginning that like just kept the momentum going with just those 5 or 6, you would have been more than happy, So like, I don't think that groups always need to scale either. So just stay small. And in fact, like I would focus more on engagement in the beginning rather than growth, so find what resonates with that small group that really wants to sort of meaningfully connect with each other. Okay, let me see if there were other questions. I think we might have time for 2 more questions. Let me see. Okay, Natalie, I'm going to go to Natalie's question. I'm going to read it out here. I'm helping our elementary school principals start affinity groups to improve parent engagement. How can we ensure important issues get elevated? Because as a white woman on the school improvement team, I don't think it's important for me to join the group. Do we need to hire translators? How do we ensure safe spaces? Phew, that's a hard one. Anyone want to take a stab?
I'd say so. My thoughts are really more around generally facilitating discussions and creating kind of a common space for conversation. Is what are your principles that you agree to going in, and if do people have clarity on the purpose and boundaries? And those are maybe less controversial topics to start with, but they give you a good foundation and some vocabulary to use as you navigate kind of rougher waters together.
Anybody else want to add to that? Us, go ahead.
I would add to the similar idea of Rosa, like to find some commonalities, which you will find if you start asking the right questions to people and trying to build from these common grounds up. And yeah, it might not be the thing you thought it was going to be, but it could be completely different, even better. So I would start with that, with the common things.
Yeah. And Rosa, I really love what you said before. Like, in the beginning, like you like set up a 15-minute meeting and met individually with all of the new members. And I would say that, like, especially when you're starting out, like, don't be afraid to like actually go and do outreach and set up those like one-on-one connections and find out what the needs are of the community that you're looking to serve. What are their goals, what programming they'd like to see, what resources can you bring to the table, how they would like to partner or collaborate with you. I'm going to emphasize again, sometimes like scale doesn't work in the beginning. It's like, it's do things that don't scale and really build that early sort of engagement and like really understanding connection with the early members. So. Okay, so I'm going to ask Shelly's question. So Shelly, and I think we touched upon this a little bit, but if you want to add anything, after setting up the community affinity group, do you crowdsource ideas for discussion topics, or do you have a preset agenda that the leads come up with?
In our case, I think it's in general something like a pre-organized. We send it a survey of what the main topics of the community wanted. We look for people who want to own that kind of topic and prepare a set of questions from there. And of course, they end up in very different ways sometimes. But yeah, the idea is to keep some kind of a clear agenda so people know how they can contribute, they can support. But also a lot of spontaneous things have come up in the sessions, which is also very interesting to see. So I would suggest to start something with like a predetermined, and if the group allows it, like flexibility, it can go that way after, for sure.
Yeah, we do something very similar. I think just getting results from our survey, we understood like what type of topics and events the group wanted to cover. And then when it came to time to plan a specific event, we posted it in the community and asked like who wants to volunteer or help out with this. So help with just like not only having things that are relevant to the community, but also getting engagement with those who want to be involved. And I think it helps also to just be fluid, as we touched on, like, the layoffs that have happened recently, like that might not have been something that would have come up in a survey, but definitely something we can pivot to because it's very much relevant to the time. So just being flexible helps.
It's great. Great advice. I love that. Like, yeah, what's on everybody's minds based on sort of what might be going on macroeconomically or, or trends in the world or whatever. So that's great. All right, we are almost out of time. And I know that the Women in Product team is going to, if you're interested and willing to stay, break folks out into sort of small groups so you can, start to build new connections and maybe form your own communities. So before we do the breakout sessions, I do want to thank sort of the panel for an amazing discussion. It was amazing getting to know each of you. Love what you're doing to bring women together, to lift each other up, and continue to help support our mission of like elevating women in tech by creating these meaningful subgroups that it's easier just sometimes to find connection through like these smaller communities. And so thank you for the work that you're doing as part of Women in Product, and I hope to stay in touch with each of you. Please do drop your LinkedIn URLs too into the chat so that other folks can connect with you as well. So thank you everybody for joining us today.